Hello, everybody. Welcome to another live stream. I know I've been live streaming like crazy in the last week, but it's mainly because work really dies down for my business at around Thanksgiving. So I feel like while I have the time to crank out all these YouTube videos, I would really like to do it all now before January comes, because January is typically the busiest time of year for a lot of people who just hold on through the holidays. And then finally their New Year's resolution is to meet with that divorce attorney and to get their consultation to start their divorce process. So I do get really busy in January. Hey, Cathy, thank you so much for, I guess, being the very first guest or very first person to participate in today's live stream. So please check out Cathy's channel. Cathy talks about Harry Potter and life as a nurse, real estate around Houston, and K-pop, all sorts of really fun things. And she usually does have live streams also on Friday nights at, I think it's 9 p.m. Eastern time. So Cathy, feel free to sell yourself in the chat box and let us know when your next live stream is going to be. So let me just go ahead and take care of some of the things that were promised in today's live stream so that our friends who watch this later as a recorded show will get what they came for. So first, I promised my Facebook friend, David Lat, that I would do a shout out for his new, I'm not sure what you would call it, a website or a legal blog that he has started. His blog or his website is davidlat.substack.com. So David Lat, I'll type it into the chat box, Substack. I'm pretty sure this is the URL. I wish I could just quickly look it up again. So David is a very interesting guy. He's a Filipino-American who is really like the cream of the crop in terms of legal academia. He went to Harvard for undergrad, Yale for law school. He clerked for a federal judge, and then he worked for a big law firm for a few years, and also worked for the U.S. Attorney General's office, I think, in New York for a number of years. But at the same time, you know, David is a very, very talented writer, and he loves to write. He's very witty. He has all sorts of funny cultural references and stuff. So he started some sort of blog a long time ago. I think it was called like Underneath the Robes or Underneath Their Robes, where he anonymously would write about what was going on behind the scenes in different courts. So then he was also the founder of this really big website. It's turned into a really big thing called abovethelaw.com. So I'll type that in, abovethelaw.com. But then as far as I know, David no longer is involved with abovethelaw.com, but it became very big. There are all sorts of articles all the time. That's a place that a lot of attorneys, especially people who were working for the big firms, the elite of the legal community, would always be checking out abovethelaw.com for the latest legal news and news about different law firms, you know, how much the bonuses were, who was doing layoffs, who was doing this or that, or who became partner. So it was a really great website, and it's still going on too. So you can still go to abovethelaw.com for a lot of legal news. But you know, I was reading there, but they used to have a really great comments section where a lot of people would really engage in a lot of discussion. So I really liked that. And that's how I found out about JD Underground many years ago. But that website no longer exists. So please check out David's new blog. I think it's called Original Jurisdiction. And he has some articles already written. One of the articles is about some just basically listing all the judges and some law firm partners who have unfortunately succumbed to COVID. David himself had COVID. He was one of the early, I guess, early COVID patients who caught it in New York City right around March or so. And he was in the hospital on a ventilator for a while. He was the subject of some news articles, but luckily after about a month of misery in the hospital and teetering on the edge, he finally was able to be released from the hospital and slowly regain his strength. So now he is working hard on his new legal website, which you can see there at davidlat.substack.com. So please check it out. Okay, so what else did I promise people I would talk about? One of the subscribers asked if I could talk more about work for nonprofits as an attorney. So at first I thought, well, I've never done that myself, so what can I add to this? What can I say about it other than a lot of attorneys that work for nonprofits don't get paid well. Only some of them that work for the major organizations at the top do get paid pretty well. But then I thought about it more and I was like, wait a second, I do have some friends or I know people who worked for all sorts of different nonprofits. It's not always just legal aid, but there are so many other nonprofit organizations that are around. So, let me flesh this up so people can see David's blog. And meanwhile, I'll just quickly try to check my email to make sure I got that right. So nonprofits, I mean, there are some people that go to law school, obviously wanting to do good and change society, and they want to work for nonprofits to, help poor people after they graduate. So the downer is that by and large, these jobs don't pay well. A lot of them have starting salaries of about $40,000, $45,000, close to $50,000 would be probably the average. But again, it really depends on where you are located too. So clearly like a nonprofit job around New York City or Los Angeles would probably pay more than a nonprofit legal job that's somewhere in the middle of nowhere in the Midwest. So, but I do recall hearing that for legal aid in North Carolina, the starting pay was something like the low 40s or mid 40,000s, but they do give you some benefits, like paid time off, and there's probably some sort of retirement plan, and maybe they give you health insurance. I'm not 100% sure. So, working for nonprofits, you do have to be a true believer. I mean, the positive thing is that I wouldn't say all of them, but some of the nonprofits don't care as much about grades and whether you were on the main law review or law review editor, did a clerkship and things like that. They want people who strongly believe in the mission and the values of their organization, because you really have to believe in it in order to, work with the types of people you're going to be serving. You have a lot of direct client contact, and like I said, you're not going to be paid a ton of money. So I can see that there is often a lot of turnover in staff. So it could be legal aid, but there are all sorts of other like smaller organizations all over the place. Like in North Carolina, we have, I think it's like the Prisoner Legal Rights. There's like PISCA Legal Services. There's some sort of like consumer lending nonprofit that helps people who have been taken advantage of, organizations that help people with housing problems. So there are tons of different places. And then, of course, there's like the prestigious, ACLU. ACLUs usually have at least one staff attorney. So I think those jobs tend to pay a bit better. So I would say roughly like maybe starting pay around $80,000 to $100,000, but I can't be 100% sure. I'm sure it differs depending on the state and actual funding sources for that. And then, of course, there are other organizations that help people who are on death row or, help people do their criminal appeals. I do have a friend that works for the I think it's called the Appellate Defender's Office in North Carolina. And she didn't tell me exactly how much the pay was, but I'm gathering it was probably in the 40s to 50,000s a year. And for a lot of these nonprofits, not only do you have to be a true believer in their cause, but you also need to really be able to get along with the management. There's just a lot of, from what I've heard, there's definitely like office politics that plays into whether you're going to enjoy your job or want to stay there. So leadership is so important. Like if you get a manager that you can't work with, or that is a tyrant or a micromanager, then your life might be miserable. And you'll be like, why did I agree to work in a nonprofit? I'm being, dumped on by the management, treated like crap, and the salary isn't good. So sometimes people are unhappy. Another place around North Carolina that I've heard of is called the Farm Workers Unit. I think that's what it's called. So there are some organizations that go out there and help farm workers assert their labor rights. So, these are all great causes, really excellent places, but a lot of people do work there for a little while and then move on. And the reason also is that you have to be willing to like go out to the middle of nowhere to help a lot of these people, And this brings to mind another story that I thought I'd mention, even though it's kind of a downer. But I remember about 10 years ago, I was doing some pro bono work on a weekend for the North Carolina Advocates for Justice. We have a Hispanic Latino issues division. So we were trying to do some pro bono work for the Spanish-speaking community in Raleigh. But the funny thing was that we had more volunteer attorneys show up than actual people that wanted to be served. So most of us attorneys, we were just like sitting around eating the snacks and then shooting the breeze. And so I got to meet this attorney, this just like a normal seeming white guy who had graduated from UNC Law School, and he was working for one of those like nonprofits that serves poor people in a county that was a little farther away. So somehow he had driven all the way to Wake County to do this pro bono event. And so we were talking, and he did seem kind of depressed. He told me that, he had been trying for years to try to find another job closer to a bigger city like Raleigh or Charlotte, but he was basically stuck out in this like really small rural town serving the legal needs of the poor people there for the nonprofit organization. And I'm sure his pay was not very good. And he just seemed kind of depressed. And I was trying to come up with ideas like, hey, are you on Facebook? Or, that way he can maybe try to have some sort of social connection with other people, because that's a sad thing. Like if you're an attorney and you're placed like in a rural place, like who are you going to socialize with or be friends with? I mean, I think it would be really hard to really fit in if you're not from around there and you're just there to handle all these like, landlord tenant disputes or, somebody getting foreclosed on or something. It can be pretty tough and grueling. And he just said he had quit Facebook because he posted a few times, but nobody ever like responded to his Facebook posts and stuff. So he just deleted his Facebook account. So I never really thought much about that later until, maybe about 5 years ago, I heard through the bar news or somewhere that he had died suddenly. And just reading between the lines, I think he probably committed suicide or either had like a like a car crash or something, because when I Googled him, it turned out that he had at least 1 or 2 DWIs, not too long before he ended up dying suddenly. So it was just really sad. I was thinking, yeah, that poor guy, I wonder if he killed himself or something. So what does this mean for you? So if you're thinking about being a nonprofit lawyer, you do have to think hard, like, okay, am I willing to move to some like little rural town? Because those are the kind of places where you are needed, where people can't afford legal services. And that's where a lot of the offices are. Like not everything's going to be like some hip place like ACLU in San Francisco or the Sierra Club or whatever like bigger well-known organizations are in a big city. So you might wind up being like this oddball, attorney who's just like in the middle of nowhere. So a lot of times people do end up moving on from those types of jobs. So yeah, same thing. Hey, Tech Ty, thanks for joining in again. Yeah, so I did touch on that. Like ACLU definitely pays better from what I know, because I was actually on the board of the ACLU in North Carolina quite a while ago. And I remember when we were interviewing for staff attorneys, the pay was definitely, far above the 45, 50,000 a year. I mean, it was, I think in today's dollars, it's probably still less than 100,000, but there's definitely a lot of work to be done. And, you do have publicity. And I'm sure the attorneys that work for some of these organizations like the ACLU probably do have to worry about getting like hate mail or threats or people stalking them. So you do also have to take that into consideration, that some of the work you do might not be very popular amongst everybody around you. So be prepared for people wanting to harass you. Another bonus of the job. Okay. Hello, Dolly. Hi. Thank you for being here also. Oddball attorney. No, thank you. Yeah. So it's definitely, a thing to consider, because sometimes when you're young and you're thinking about going to law school, you do have this like romanticized idea of what it's like to go out and practice law and help all the poor oppressed people and stuff. But, you know, do you really want to live in those towns? And then what if you can't find another job to get out of there? And who are you going to date if you're still young and single in your 20s? Or who are you going to be friends with or hang out with? You know, maybe there will be like a couple of other attorneys in your office, but who knows if they will be around your same age. So Cathy says, I agree with you. You do need to consider local networking and marketing to go solo in a role. Yeah, anytime, you know, either working as a solo or working for a nonprofit or something. Yeah, there's always that downside that you might be the odd person out, and, you know, you'll be seen as an outsider because you're not from around here. Yeah. So, okay. So I think I've probably said enough about nonprofits, because it's not like I personally worked for one. So I don't want to keep like spouting off stuff that might not be true or accurate, but that's what I know from people that have worked for nonprofit legal groups as attorneys. So the next thing that I had promised we would discuss today is whether you should go solo or whether you should be self-employed. So I did write down like a list of some criteria. Let me see if I found it in this notebook here. Or maybe I'm so disorganized that I took the wrong notebook. So I did write down some notes last week, but maybe I'll end up having to ad-lib it because this might be the wrong notebook. Okay, so what does it take to be self-employed or go solo? Well, number one, you guys might have seen my I have a video that surprisingly did really well, or it's been doing pretty well. It has over 1,100 views or so. So it's about how I started a solo law practice, or how to start a solo law practice. So that says a lot of the stuff that I would reiterate today, which is number one, you really do have to have a lot of savings and money saved up. I don't really recommend taking out a loan to start a solo law practice because it's just so risky. There are so many people who end up failing, or, well, I shouldn't really say failing because it's a learning experience, right? But most people would consider it a failure if you didn't make any sort of profit after 2 years of grinding away and trying to have your own solo law practice. So it's not for everybody, because clearly there are a lot of, and I've known a lot of like really smart people who went to good law schools, but yet, you know, for a bunch of different reasons, their solo law practice or their small law firm venture did not pan out, and they quickly found other jobs working for companies or with other law firms or for the government, because it's just so hard. There's a lot of things that you have to be able to keep track of all the time. Okay. So just jumping into the comments again, media always seems to glamorize being a lawyer. I never realized how difficult it is to be successful. That's true, because what you do see, you know, like even on YouTube, like everybody wants to pretend that they're so successful and rolling in the dough and, you know, unboxing, you know, their Chanel stuff. All I don't know. I mean, it's definitely not as glamorous as I thought it would be. And plus, I really did not realize how hard the job market would be also, despite going to a tier 14 school. So thank you for being here, Angel. Angel is also a great YouTuber who has gotten more and more subscribers, and she is a graduate student in California. And she wrote a master's thesis about boba tea and Asian American culture. So please check out Angel's channel. Hi, Brian. Thank you for being here. Okay, so we will go on about, you know, should you go solo or not? So number one, do you have at least, let's say at least a year, but it would be better to have at least 2 years worth of all your living expenses plus business overhead expenses saved up. Otherwise, you're going to be in for like a pretty miserable 2 years or so, if not longer. You know, the last thing you want to do is to, you know, just fly by the seat of your pants, you know, paycheck to pay, or, you know, check to check, not knowing if you're going to have enough money to pay your rent or your mortgage, or, you know, fall behind. So if you do have student loans, it makes it even scarier to be self-employed. So, you know, here's the truth. Like, and the sad truth is it's still kind of like class privilege, you know, because I'm living example of it. The only reason I was able to go solo after 6 years of working for small firms and making lousy pay was because I didn't have any student loans. You know, my dad's a doctor. You I was married at the time to someone who had a very steady job that made good money. So he was able to afford to pay for all of our living expenses, mortgage, utilities, everything. So I really didn't have that much risk leaving my previous firm and starting my own practice. So when you look at some of these young law school graduates who start their own practices, chances are likely they got money from their parents. Okay, mommy and daddy are still footing the bill for them to, start up their law practice. And so here's a funny thing, like, a friend of mine was selling his home, and these buyers got into a big bidding war for this kind of old home near downtown Raleigh. And downtown Raleigh has become a lot more lively in the last 5 years or so. And so the property values have really shot up. But who was doing the fighting between each other, trying to drive up the price of this old house near downtown Raleigh? Well, they were the parents of these young guys. These guys, clearly did not have the income or the credit history or anything to buy a home, or much less paid a mortgage. And in fact, the guy that ended up buying a home, he's an attorney that didn't have a real job and is doing some contract work and stuff, but his parents bought him the house. So once again, it's kind of like you definitely have a huge leg up if you have parents or a spouse who are able to support you while you start your own business, because otherwise it's just so scary not knowing, am I going to be able to even make a profit of $1,000 this month? Or, oh no, business is down. How am I going to keep the lights on? How am I going to pay my cell phone bill? I mean, you don't want to do that. So that's why for some people, you don't really have that choice of going solo. It's safer to just stay doing document review or working at whatever job you're doing anyway, instead of just running out and taking a chance. And who knows if it will be profitable or not. Okay, so number one, have lots of money saved up, or have that sugar daddy, sugar mommy, parents footing the bill. Number two, you also have to be a pretty type A, like a very organized and responsible person. And I don't want to seem like I'm bragging, but I guess it comes across as braggedy and stuff. But I feel like I'm the kind of person that can't sleep well if I know that something is hanging out there, like that email didn't get responded to, or I know there's a deadline coming up. So I feel the pressure, and I know I'm going to have to, get some work done for my clients and stuff. So you have to be that type of person that is always kind of thinking and multitasking. You have to be able to multitask and have a good memory and keep things organized, because there's going to be so many things that you have to keep track of once you're self-employed. It's not just about showing up to work every day by 8:30 or 9 o'clock and then leaving everything at work by 5 or 6 or 7 or something like that. Instead, I feel like I'm always thinking about work, which is sort of a bad thing. But that's just the way of life when you're self-employed. You just really can't just turn it off and then suddenly just be like, okay, well, it's 5 o'clock on a Friday, so I'm just leaving behind all this mess, and I'm not going to respond to any emails and phone calls now. So instead, when you're self-employed, especially at the beginning, when you're really hungry for business, you have to be really responsive. Like, the client sent you an email, I'm going to respond right now, even though it's 9:30 p.m. This person sent me an email on Saturday. Well, I'm just going to respond anyway, because otherwise it's going to be something else I have to do on Monday morning. So you have to be that type of person that enjoys accomplishing little tasks and get that done, respond to that email, get this done, do this letter, do this demand, work on somebody's separation agreement, and keep track of it all. So it helps to be very organized. People might think I'm very old-fashioned, but I still keep a day planner, like a written one. And I'm very proud of it, because I've saved all of my paper, old school, old style, day planners ever since probably 1992. So I have this whole shelf full of my old tape planners, and I can flip it open and see, oh, that's what happened on this date back in 1993, or, 2002, October 13th, I went to the grocery store and I spent $41.38. So so you do have to be kind of like an anal retentive person to be a good self-employed chat as opposed to just typing things into like a Google Calendar or on my cell phone or something, because I feel like this is tangible. I don't have to worry about this like disappearing on me if something were to happen to my cell phone or whatever. So yeah, so those are like the characteristics of someone that is more likely to be a successful, self-employed person or solo attorney. You have to be that type of person that is always going to be diligent and don't slack off, because that's the last thing you need is to forget a deadline or forget to do something by a deadline in court. Then you could screw over yourself and your client and you're going to face a bar complaint. So we don't need that. Angel says, thanks for sharing these stories. Yeah, it's so important to have a financial safety net before you can go solo. Yeah, so it's just the reality of it is that, the kids that graduate from law school that come from the richer families are more likely to succeed if they want to go solo or even have a chance of going solo. Yeah, let me see. Does the ABA have resources to help cash-strapped solo attorneys? I don't think so. Free office space in certain cities. That would be really awesome. I've never heard of it, but to tell you the truth, I actually quit my membership in the ABA years ago. The only reason I was in the ABA was because I was working for a firm back then that paid for my ABA dues. So that was probably 2003 that I quit being in the ABA, because all you really got was this fancy looking magazine, and then a lot of junk mail and solicitations and stuff. So yeah, so I'm not even a member of the ABA, and I haven't been for the last 17 years, but I'd be really surprised that they would do anything to help cash-strapped solos or offer free spaces, because there are too many cash-strapped solos. There are too many of us. So let's see. Yeah, going solo is 24/7, says Cathy. Yeah, no clocking out. Yeah, Cathy's husband is a realtor around the Houston area. Yeah, same with me as a manager. Yeah, because there's always something. And then people just love to email at all hours. And then, I can't resist checking my email. Even when it's Saturday night at 11:30 p.m., I'll be like, oh, great. This client or this attorney, it's usually a client. I mean, most attorneys are nice and they're not going to email you on the weekends. Yeah, sometimes even this weekend, I was just dealing with more emails today and yesterday. But I do feel that sense of urgency, okay, this person is paying me, so I better respond. Otherwise, it's just more stuff for me to have to deal with on Monday morning anyway. So Monday mornings are usually already crazy enough with the phone calls and emails, so might as well get stuff done on the weekend. So Tech Ty says, would you ever consider hiring another attorney to work with you, or would you not want the management headache? Yeah, definitely the latter. Yeah. So one of the things that I've seen, a common problem that I've seen with some attorneys who try to do a partnership, is that it usually ends up failing and then they end up suing each other. So it's just really kind of sad and can create more stress for you, because wouldn't you like to be the master of your own domain as opposed to always having to talk to your business partner or business partners to figure out, even something as mundane as, okay, what's our office logo going to be? Or what's our stationery going to be like? Or, what kind of phone plan should we get? Or, oh, well, I should mention this, that at the beginning, when I was ready to leave my firm, I was talking with 3 other attorneys. We were all part of this ad hoc group of young attorneys who would have occasional fun attorneys dinners. And it was just a word of mouth. It was really fun. This was before everybody got married and had kids, or, well, not everybody got married and had kids. But back then, when we actually had time after work to socialize, we would get together for dinner, usually in Raleigh at some casual Italian place, and just blow off steam and talk about our crazy jobs and stuff. So these 3 other attorneys and I, we did think about starting a firm together, because we were all pretty disgruntled at our firms, and we couldn't even decide on where we should have the office. So that was already a big hurdle, number one, because we lived in totally different parts of the Triangle area. So of course, everybody wants it to be kind of closer to where they live, but we had somebody living in North Raleigh, Morrisville, Durham, another part of Raleigh. So we couldn't find office space that was going to be good for all of us. And, one friend ended up starting his own practice in Durham, and he's a very successful attorney who mostly focuses on criminal defense. So he's been in the news a lot defending people. And another friend, she wound up, well, we did share office space for a little while in Raleigh. She was my former coworker, so she's still a divorce attorney on her own in Raleigh. And the other person, what's really awesome, well, she started an immigration firm, but then I think they had a hard time making a profit. And they did end up making the mistake of hiring a full-time office manager or a paralegal or something, which I think is really bad, because why would you want that extra financial burden of having to pay somebody a steady paycheck and benefits and keeping up with all the payroll rules or tax deduction? I mean, it's just like a headache to have another employee, especially when you're just starting your practice. So, and I sense that there was a little bit of unhappiness between the two law partners, that maybe like one person felt like she was doing more of the work. I mean, that usually happens, because I have this other like relative of a relative who did have a law practice in Los Angeles with a few of his lawyer friends for a while. And I think things fell apart there also, because like he was the one making money, but the other people seemed to be slacking off, and they didn't want to pay their fair share of all the office expenses and stuff. So they disbanded. And he ended up working as an attorney for the in immigration for the federal government now. So he's doing really well for himself. So you just never know. You know, the worst case scenario is when, which I have seen or heard of a lot, is when people are sort of friends, or they knew each other from law school or whatever, and then they go into partnership together. Then they start fighting and squabbling over, you know, who's going to pay for what, or how are they going to divide up the profits and stuff, or there's just like so many things you can fight over. It's almost like a marriage that's even exponentially tougher, because you have to be with the person all day and really have a lot of financial intertwinings with them. So yeah, that's why I really have never really felt like I wanted to hire somebody else or go into partnership with anybody, because I don't want to have to run all of my decisions by somebody else. And, you know, it's a good thing, because otherwise, you know, the three other attorneys and I probably wouldn't be on such friendly terms still. So we're still all vaguely in touch through Facebook and run into each other occasionally. So, yeah, so Angel says, I'm 25 and I still use physical planners virtual. Yeah, I'm waiting for my next cheap paper planner for 2021 to show up in the mail. I ordered it on target.com, so it should be coming any day now. And I'm really excited. Except that this kind of stinks, because since it doesn't have like wire, like a spiral binding, I found this really hard to use all year, because it wouldn't lay completely flat unless I really mashed it and stuff. So next time I am never going to buy one of these like book bound type of planners, because as you can see, I didn't write anything in most of it, because I just used the very beginning with the months and stuff. It was just hard to get this to stay open. Okay, so self-employment, what else? So being self-employed, you have to be in charge of so many different things. Like, it's not just doing the work for your clients. If only it were that easy, but you have to deal with all the administrative tasks of, you know, like keeping track of all your expenses for your taxes, you know, making sure you paid your estimated quarterly taxes if you're a sole proprietor as opposed to being incorporated. You have to make sure you paid your rent on time and all the bills, keep track of CLE hours. You know, you're responsible for your own continuing legal ed classes and all the mandatory bar dues, and buying the office supplies and buying toner. I remember it was such a pain one time because my printer kept breaking down. So I constantly had to keep like dragging this printer in my trunk to this repair shop down in Apex, which is kind of far away. And so that's a real drag. Or sometimes I have like packages of documents. I have to like take them physically to the post office to weigh them and mail them out, because I don't have like a postal center or any assistant that's actually in my office that could do that kind of grunt work. So there's a lot of things that you do as a self-employed person, you know, mainly to save money, but also just so you know things are getting done right. You know, like let's say, you know, like at a bigger firm, people would likely just like tell their legal secretary to like draft up a cover letter or draft this thing or whatever. But ultimately you have to still spend time reviewing the documents or reviewing what your secretary or your associate or your paralegal did anyway, you know, to make sure that it was done right. So instead of taking all those extra steps, you know, I don't mind typing up my cover letters. I have templates, you know, mostly saved on the computer. You know, I don't mind licking my own envelopes or, you know, preparing the documents and hole punching stuff and all that. So, Yeah, the good thing is that pretty much in all of the office spaces I've had, I never had to do the housekeeping. So that was good because that was always like farmed out by the landlord, people that I rented office space from. So I didn't have to bring in my vacuum cleaner on the weekends and vacuum the floors or clean the toilets or anything. So that part I was spared. But pretty much everything else I have had to do. And, sometimes it has been a struggle. And like I said, it's always something hanging over your head, like, oh my God, I still have to do this or do that, or I got to check on, make sure I got all my CLE, continuing legal ed hours for this year. And, oh yeah, I have this other bill that, like a bar due that I have to pay. And you need to order some more checks because, a lot of law firms still use checks. Or, I have to send checks to pay for the court filing fees and everything. So yeah, we're still in the Stone Ages with that and have to use checks. So so that's basically life in a nutshell when you're self-employed or you're a solo attorney. So it is, oh, and on top of that, you also have to solicit business too. Yeah, besides doing all the administrative stuff and buying your office supplies and mailing out your stuff and, like buying furniture and keeping track of your client stuff, there is also the duty of trying to get clients or getting customers. So how are you going to do that? A lot of it is just through networking, really. I found that advertising really wasn't that useful for me, and it was usually turned out to be a waste of time to buy ads in different things, or even like online ads didn't really work out for me. So part of the time is spent, just going, I mean, it's kind of fun, going to all these like different local bar events, bar lunches, just kind of schmoozing in my county, we have Awake Women Attorneys group, which has lunches like every month. Well, they used to until COVID happened. And then I was on the board of the Durham Orange County Women Attorneys Association back when I worked in Durham before I started my own practice. So sending faxes, actually, sometimes I do. So it sucks because it's almost that time of the year again. Every December 30th or so, eFax automatically dings my credit card and I get billed for another year of eFax service. But I still have to do it because I do get some attorneys that send me faxes, or the EEOC people might send a fax, or I have some slightly older clients that still, they'll go to Kinko's or something and fax me something because they don't have the ability to scan in and email me things. Yeah, so that's kind of a necessary expense, but at least it's not too much. It's probably like $100 or $110 a year for the fax service. So I have an eFax account. Duke, hi Duke. Thank you for showing up again. I just had this like ad hoc live stream just so I could churn out another video this afternoon, the one about like shocking law school statistics. So he says, what's your thoughts on growing with a mid-sized firm to make partner, or would it be more wise to go with a small firm or work on going solo? Well, it really depends on yourself because there are plenty of smart people who tried to go solo and they realized they were no good at it because they were, here's another downside of being solo. Like you have to be really self-motivated because otherwise, especially at the beginning when you don't have many clients, it can be so easy to just slack off. Like I knew this guy who he got fired from his law firm, so he tried to start his own practice and he was mainly working out of his own home, but it just seemed like he was a little bit too much of a slacker, I mean, based on what I heard, that he didn't have the drive and the hustle. So even if you're your own boss, that doesn't mean you can just like roll out of bed at 11:30 in the morning and, not do any work or just totally slack off. There still has to be some sort of regimen, even, well, now, most people are not actually physically going into the office, but I did always feel like I was a lot more productive going into the office, maybe dressing up a little bit better, not necessarily wearing a suit or anything, but I did feel like I'm ready to do work and focus and stuff. You have to still have a routine, even when you don't have a boss who's expecting you to show up at 8:30 every morning. So growing with a mid-sized firm to make partner or more wise to go. Yeah, it really depends on your personality though. And if you think you can get enough business to go solo. So mid-sized firm versus small firm. Yeah. With a small firm, well, there's variables galore because like I worked for this small firm that used to tell us that if we stayed working with them for 5 years, then we would make partner. But then one of my friends / coworkers, like I kind of feel like they were kind of misleading, because it turned out they also expected her to pay them something like $80,000 to $100,000 in today's dollars. So I think that's kind of shady and weird. It's like you tell people that, oh, you last here for 5 years, you're going to be making partner, and then later you turn the tables and say, oh, and you also have to give us like whatever it was, 80, 90 to $100,000. I mean, who has that kind of money? Yeah, I would say it just really depends. Like, if you really like the people you work with, so much of it is just like individual circumstances, and whether you are working with good, ethical people that you would be proud to be associated with, that you can trust that they're going to pull their share of the weight. There are different firms that have totally different compensation arrangements. Like, you could say you're partners with somebody, but really you're just sharing office space and have like the same website and stuff, but each person really just gets to keep their own profits, other than contributing to their share of the rent or whatever, the overhead and the stationery and supplies and the legal assistants or the receptionist. So yeah, it's really hard to say. I would say that, yeah, it just really depends on the people that you work with, and whether you like them and you trust them and you know what their work ethic is like, so that you don't feel screwed over later on. Yeah, and there are a lot of people that just feel like they know that from the start that, look, there's no way I want to go solo, because that's too risky. It's a lot easier knowing that there's already like a whole cadre of legal assistants and secretaries at this firm, and we know how everything is run. Everybody knows their place and their role. So going solo, especially if you're used to working for a bigger firm where there's a lot more services and amenities and more security and a steady flow of clients, then that definitely makes sense for a lot of people to just stick with their firms instead of, jumping ship and going solo, because who knows if you'll be able to take some clients with you or not. Yeah, so that's the main reason why a lot of people just stick with their firms and try to make partner, but sometimes people just aren't even made partner anyway, so they have no choice but to leave. Okay, so Hello Dolly says, what do you think about having your law office inside your house instead of paying rent for an office space? Save money. Yeah, actually, I have this attorney friend who has always operated out of his home, and then he would meet his clients like outside or in his home office. But to me, that's kind of scary, because you just never know if people are going to turn on you. Like, I don't even do criminal law, but yet I've had my share of civil litigation clients and family law clients that just turned, bat shit crazy on me. Like, they suddenly like got all mad, or they got upset over something that didn't happen well for them in court, or they had buyer's remorse after we settled, or they wouldn't pay me or something like that. There's always some potential for people to make your life miserable, So that's why it's like, why would you want them to know where you live? Like, they come straight into your house. They know, like, if you have kids, or what your household schedule is like, or what kind of car you drive. And yeah, to me, that's too personal. Like, I would never want to have a real home office. But on the other hand, it's totally fine to have some sort of cheap deal with another law firm, like maybe another solo attorney or a small law firm that could use the extra money. And you could just offer them something really cheap, like, hey, how about I pay you $150 a month or $250 a month, and then I get to use the conference room sometimes, and use this office address as my office address. Yeah, so that could be another cheap way to go about it, where you have a place to physically meet your clients in an office, a real professional looking office, as opposed to having people come over to your house. So yeah, I really wouldn't be down for having an office inside your house. Sometimes you do hear about some younger, I guess they're younger and they probably don't have the money, so they talk about having a virtual office where they only have like virtual meetings with clients and stuff. And to me, that still isn't like the best ideal situation, because you still have to occasionally meet with people. At least in my line of work, I still have to go to the office sometimes and meet with them to get their signatures on documents. And nothing beats actually meeting with someone face to face, even though we're wearing masks on and socially distanced and stuff. But it's yeah, I definitely would not be for having the law office as your, right inside your home. Yeah. But the people that I know who do that, they're all men. So maybe they feel more macho and like they can handle it themselves, or they have guns or something in case somebody goes crazy on them or starts making threats and stuff and wants to come beat down on their house door. So, okay. Hey, Dr. Sev, thank you. Dr. Sev just had her own live stream. She has a financial channel, so please check it out. I'm trying to think what else I was going to mention about being self-employed or being a solo practitioner. Yeah, so you do have to have that kind of like ability to multitask and be in charge of all sorts of stuff. Oh, and also you should know when it's time to hire somebody. Yeah, because I have mentioned in some of my videos that I do have a remote assistant who works part-time. Oh, thank you, Cathy. Thanks. So I do have a remote assistant who works part-time, and she's a retired teacher that I found through nextdoor.com. So it's just kind of like a good way for her to make extra money on the side. So let me tell you this is true. An attorney that I'm sort of friends with mentioned to me, and actually several attorneys have mentioned to me, that in the beginning they would answer their own phone calls and return phone calls to potential clients, but they would change their voices and pretend to be the legal assistant or the secretary, So for example, this one person, she said, I would adopt the name Heather. And so I would pretend to be Heather, the legal secretary, calling up these people and telling them that they would need to come in and schedule a consultation and pay for it and stuff. So that way I knew later on if they left another message asking for Heather, I knew it was somebody I had already spoken to. So yeah, that's a way. If you're really, really like broke or don't have enough money, then sure, you could like do your voice changing act and pretend to be your own secretary to call back people. Yeah, but I find that to be just really, a waste of time. There's so many tire kickers out there. That's another thing about being self-employed. Yeah, I definitely wrote this down in my notes, which I can't find anymore because I'm not as organized as I thought I am. So yeah, you definitely have to charge for your time. And that's the hard thing about being self-employed is that, people all think that, oh, wow, you just started your own business, you must be rich. But that's actually like the brokest time in your life, right? So definitely know how much your fees are going to be for whatever services you're going to offer. And even though the bar claims that we're not supposed to discuss fees or anything because that could be like an antitrust violation. So we can't discuss it on the listserv how much we charge our clients or anything. Well, there's nothing wrong with just if you're friends with some other people in your profession, just kind of ask around, like, how much do you charge to do an uncontested divorce? Or how much do you charge for a qualified domestic relations order? Or how much do you charge for a consultation? And most of the time, people are willing to tell you personally, one-on-one, this is how much I charge, or, that sounds like a good price to me. So, let's see. So Severine Bryan says, I need to hire someone, but my business is not making enough money as of yet, or quit the 9 to 6 and do my business full time. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. So definitely, stick to your paying job, until you think that your self-employed business is really going to turn into a profitable business. I think it is pretty risky to jump all in and be like, okay, I'm self-employed now. I mean, although that's what I did, but I had that, safety net of having a lot of money and, the spouse who could pay for all the bills and stuff. Yeah. So for a lot of young attorneys, what they do is they wind up doing, contract attorney jobs, like not just document review, because a lot of times the document review companies will say you have to do a minimum of 20 hours or a minimum of 30 hours a week with us, which makes it almost impossible to be trying to run your own solo law practice. Also, another thing is that most people who graduate from law school, they have no clue how to actually practice law in real life. So it is pretty scary to try to do that. So definitely, try to find other sources of income to help support you while you're still trying to grow your solo law practice or your own whatever self-employment venture is. So yeah, there was I would say, I have to admit, I did have some like interns that were law students who didn't actually get paid, but, I brought them around to everything. They went to court with me and they were, they were given the whole learning experience and stuff, but they did also kind of help me by making phone calls once in a while and stuff. Oh, well, thank you. Okay. So somebody is flattering me. Haha. Okay, well, I feel flattered because I'm getting older and my birthday's coming up, so I feel kind of old and dowdy these days. So I'll take any compliments I can get. So, okay, what were we talking about? Okay, about saving money and making sure people pay you. So this is what stinks about being self-employed, especially as a solo attorney. There's just always people coming to you wanting free legal advice and free legal services. And, can you help me do this? Hey, take a look at these documents I just got from a small claims court case. I got sued. Can you look over here and tell me what it is? And sometimes it's other attorneys that do that to me too. So I'm like, are you kidding me? You should know better than that. Don't try to take advantage of your fellow self-employed attorney. We are all in it because we're trying to run a business, not to be running some sort of social services, legal aid service where we can just offer all our services for free. So I have to admit, I have had some friendships just go sour because, I got sick and tired of them calling me repeatedly for free legal advice and not even listening to what I was telling them. And they were happy to pay somebody else like $200, $250 an hour for their advice, but they thought that they can just call me and email me repeatedly for free. So that's a tough thing about being self-employed. You have to also be able to set boundaries with people who just all want a piece of your knowledge and take up your time. And meanwhile, you are not making any money that day, but you still have lots of overhead and bills to pay. So you have to learn to quickly discern, is this person just wasting my time? Or is this person likely to become a paying client? So that's why I'm really glad to have my assistant screen out all these potential clients, because she's actually very blunt and funny. So she'll just send me an email she's like, yeah, another cheapo, she was already arguing about why she had to pay the consultation fee. I don't think she's going to call back, So, and that's fine, because sometimes people are not worth your time. They think that since you're just like a small solo practitioner or it's you running the business, then you can also give them free stuff. So let's not fall into that trap of always wanting to be nice to people and thinking that it's going to lead to more business, because all it's going to lead to is more people taking advantage of you. So Sam says, hey, Sam again. Sam showed up on the other live stream and kept things pretty happening the last time. Is it true or false law profs have little or no experience? Yeah, that's true. Yeah. I'm talking about the tenure track and the tenured law faculty. So it is true, because my ex-husband is a law professor and, he's very well decorated in terms of academic credentials and stuff. But the truth is that he only practiced law for a year before he went on the teaching market. So I think that's the truth for pretty much all the tenure track or tenured law faculty at all law schools, particularly the better ranked law schools. The low ranked law schools are probably more likely to not be as choosy, because they really base the selection process on, number one, did you go to some top school like Harvard or Yale or Stanford, some sort of Ivy League law school? Were you on the law review? Did you clerk for a federal judge or a U.S. Supreme Court judge? That's very rare, really hard to get. Do you have a PhD? Even better. And have you published any articles in law reviews? So, I know hardly anybody's watching this one video I recently made about what is law review, because it is a little too niche driven or too boring or something. But law review is really where academia, sets the goals. You have to publish these law review research articles in law journals, to pad your resume to try to get these teaching positions. So they don't really value you having any real courtroom experience or real practice experience. In fact, the longer you have been working as a practicing attorney, the less likely you are going to be able to jump in and say, oh, well, I'd also like to teach at this law school and be on the tenure track now. I mean, you might be able to get a job as a clinical law professor, which is where they let third-year law students work with clients under the supervision of a real licensed attorney. But those jobs don't pay as much. They still pay decent. I would say probably in the around 100,000 or low 100,000s for a clinical professor. And then the adjuncts typically are practicing attorneys, but they get paid piddly. It's probably like $5,000 to teach a class for a semester, maybe at most. Yeah, so a lot of times adjunct faculty, they do it more because, they sincerely love teaching and they just want to have something else to stick on their resume, or maybe they really do need that extra $5,000 or $10,000 in a year or so. Yeah, because when my relative was teaching legal research and writing at Charleston School of Law, she was paid probably about $3,000 to teach a class. And I can't remember if that was for the whole school year or was it just for one semester, $3,000. But that was several years ago, though. So, yeah, it's true. Most of the tenure track law professors have not practiced law much at all. Jonathan says, what would be the best way to learn how to actually represent a client in court, litigate, or argue? As you mentioned, I feel most law students don't know how to actually be a lawyer upon graduation. Yeah, definitely you want to try to intern with like a smaller law firm or any sort of like legal employer. Like, you know, when I was in law school, I spent some time interning with the Fairfax PD's office and the Washington, D.C. Public Defender Service. So that was great because I got to follow the attorneys around doing everything they did. You know, I was kind of like a little shadow, but I did do a little bit of helpful stuff, I guess. You know, like going to jail, going to the mental institution to talk with people, talking with witnesses, going to court. So I feel like I've really learned a lot because I was just going along everywhere with the attorneys to learn. And they do have these clinics. Usually third-year law school students can take part in clinics, but you have to apply to be in it. So I wasn't selected to take part in this like civil advocacy clinic that I really wanted to do. So I was really bummed out about that. So you either intern or during the summer, try to work with a smaller firm so you'll have more hands-on experience and maybe even have client contact. That's what's most important. You know, if you're planning on wanting to be practice ready and you're not planning on or not able to work for a humongous big law firm. So you want to try to get those internships in and spend your summers doing something that is really a learning experience. Oh, Dr. Sev says, good riddance. I say, you need to eat too and pay your bills. Yeah, that's so true. You know, like I just couldn't get it. Why, you know, even people that I thought were my friends would keep wanting to take advantage of me. And so after a while, I was like, this is not like a true friendship. Like you wouldn't have called me if you didn't needed help with your divorce anyway, or you wouldn't have called me if you didn't have that problem with that contractor that screwed your family over, you know, and then suddenly you want to pay somebody else to handle it. What about me? I could use some money here, you know, and my rent is due for my office. God, you know, so sometimes you just have to just say no and put your foot down and say, I'm not going to keep, you know, playing around like this. And my fee is blankety blank. You know, you need to pay me this much for the consultation. I'd be glad to review this document. Here's the link up. You know, I have this like payment link where people can pay me with a credit card online pretty easily. And sometimes I never hear from people again. It's like, okay, see ya. You know, okay. So hello, Dolly says again, great advice. I would tell the client, yep, exactly. Yeah, that's what I do now because most of my consultations are done through phone or by Zoom now. So my assistant always tells people, you know, this is the website. You need to pay for the consultation fee. And, you know, it needs to be paid at least 4 hours prior to the scheduled time. These are the times available. So, you know, sometimes I still get these like people who will still, you know, keep calling my legal assistant repeatedly just to keep whining about stuff like, oh, well, you know, does she handle this? Or can I tell you a little bit more about my problem first? Because I want to make sure that she's going to take on my case before I pay for the consultation. So, you know, that already gives you the red flags to know that, you know, some people are just going to waste your time all the time. And that's the struggle of being self-employed or being a solo attorney, is that it's not enough to have enough capital, you know, to keep your practice running. It's not enough to be smart and responsible and diligent and know that you can handle people's cases and do a good job for them. But it's also just making sure that you're good about setting those boundaries and making sure that people pay you and pay you on time and ask for enough money. Because here's another mistake I made. When I first started my practice, I was so desperate for clients that, well, I didn't advertise on Craigslist, thank God, but I did do lawyers referral service, which is like something run by the North Carolina Bar Association to send a lot of like lower income people your way, because you can only charge, back then you could only charge up to $30 for up to a half an hour consultation. But inevitably, everybody always stayed past that initial 30 minutes and they still only wanted to pay $30. And some of them would balk at paying the $30 for the consultation too. And, you know, it was just like so much of a drag. And back then I was also only asking for like a $2,000 retainer deposit for custody or divorce litigation cases, which is way, way too low. I mean, this was like 14 years ago, but there's no way in heck I would do anybody's litigation case for only a $2,000 retainer deposit these days. It's ridiculous, because when the retainer gets run down, then you ask for another retainer deposit, and then a lot of times people will just drag their feet, or they'll complain, or they'll make up excuses as to why they can't cough up an additional retainer deposit, even though it was part of your legal representation agreement. Yeah, so that's why it's so important, no matter what profession you're in. When you're self-employed, you have to set the parameters, and that often includes, making sure you have good contracts written up. Always have like a written signed contract between yourself and the client/customer, because otherwise things can go haywire where they thought that you were going to do a bunch of other stuff for them, or it's just always better to get all of the terms in writing up front while things are still good, so that everybody is on the same page as to how much they're going to pay you and what exactly is going to be covered by that payment, and what are the penalties if they don't pay you. Usually you should say that, for late payments, there's going to be an extra whatever, extra 5% late fee or extra late fee added on for every month that the payment is late, and, cost of recovery, any attorney's fees you incur to go after them will also be, billed against them. So there are certain ways that you learn. The more you do, the more money you feel like you are worth, and that you're not going to just play around with people who are going to try to bargain you down and don't even have that money to cough up in the first place. So I do feel really lucky to finally be in that spot in my career where I'm not that desperate anymore for business, and I sure as heck am not going to do somebody's case for only $2,000 up front. So Hello Dolly says, are adjunct professors better at teaching legal skills for the workplace? Yeah, I think so, because when I was at Georgetown, like by third year, I took some like civil litigation class that was taught by two guys that were really excellent attorneys that were, I think they were both partners already at White and Case in DC. So, and then I also took another like civil discovery class that was taught by another attorney who had his own practice in DC. So that was also really good too. So I really enjoyed those classes by third year, because I felt like, hey, I don't care that these people didn't publish, 10 law review articles about some esoteric topic that nobody wants to read anyway. I wanted to learn from people who are actively practicing law and knew what they were talking about, and could tell me, this is how you do interrogatories, or this is how you do a deposition, or what is a deposition. So all the kudos to those adjunct professors who do all of this great teaching and don't get paid enough and don't have benefits. Yeah. So Severine Bryan says, I had a girl always asking for financial advice. One time I asked her to give me a review and she never did it. Oh. The next time she asked for specific advice, I sent her a link to one of my YouTube videos. Lots of yeah. So that's where, the very first time somebody tries to get your services for free, then immediately start talking about what your fees are. That way it will scare away the cheapos right away, unless the person is totally clueless and doesn't get your hint that you need to be paid, that this is your job and your profession. Then, like, let's say somebody starts talking like, hey, Judy, I'm having problems with my husband and I think we need to get a divorce and stuff. So it kind of, to me, it depends on what kind of relationship I already have with the person. So, it's still kind of, I know it doesn't sound nice, but sometimes it still kind of annoys me, because, just feels kind of like it puts you in a bad spot, because the person already wants to get legal advice and stuff. And this is exactly what people actually pay me hundreds of dollars for. So, so I don't mind talking for maybe a little bit, but then normally I just don't like representing people that I'm actually friends with or have some sort of friendly relationship with. So it's always a good policy just to not even represent your own friends or get involved in their problems and stuff as a solo attorney. But then in terms of asking for financial advice, yeah, you could also just like give a little bit of information, but then just say, hey, I'd love to, schedule a time to talk with you more about this. And my normal rate is whatever, $150 for the first meeting. And, just tell them that you accept cash, check, or credit cards. So you start mentioning the money part, and then suddenly they'll be like, oh, okay, well, I don't know if I really want this, So that's kind of the way that I handle it, is that, you do kind of talk a little bit, but then you be sure you start mentioning how much your fees are. So okay. So I'm not really sure if anybody else has any other questions in general about practicing law or running your own practice and stuff. So what else did I want to mention? Yeah. Oh, okay. So we were talking about whether you should hire people. And how do you know when it's time to farm out work and hire an associate or hire a legal assistant or something? Well, obviously, if you have the money, you're making so much money that you don't mind spending an extra, whatever it could be, $40,000 a year to hire like an office manager, 45,000. Maybe they get paid even more now around North Carolina. Yeah. So you have to see if you can not only pay the person's payroll, but you also have to pay, gosh, I'm not even sure what's all this. Like, you probably need to, eventually you would have to have like workers' comp insurance, and, there's definitely overhead and more things that you have to offer to your employees other than just their paycheck. So then you have to think about maybe writing up an employee manual. I just never liked the idea of having like a full-time employee that I was solely responsible for, for their paychecks, because I don't even know how much money I make every month. It's so unpredictable being self-employed. So you really do have to have like a lot of excess income that you're willing to share and just basically give away to somebody else to make your life easier. And another thing that I would like to caution is that I've heard so many times, this also happened to like a relative of mine who's in the medical profession. I've heard of so many instances where the secretaries or the legal assistants or office managers stole money or was doing something shady because the owner, the self-employed person, was just so busy and in over their heads that they weren't really paying attention to where all the money was going. So that does come with its own headaches, because even if you think that the person is really trustworthy or was referred by somebody else, or you sort of know them, you just never know, how that person could end up, trying to steal from you or fudging their, just lying about what their work hours were. So yeah, you definitely don't want to have more headaches where it turns out that your trusted office manager has actually been like embezzling money from you. Because that did happen to this attorney that I've heard of in Raleigh. This lady was in the news years ago for being the office manager of the solo practitioner's law firm. And it turned out she had stolen more than $100,000 over the course of many years, just stealing the money and stuff. And that also happened at one of the law firms I used to work for, where the legal assistant who, handled the intake for traffic tickets, it turned out she was taking money from clients and pocketing the money herself and then farming it out to out-of-county attorneys to handle their out-of-county traffic tickets. So they ended up doing a criminal investigation of her. I'm sure something happened to her. And they also found out she was already under a felony diversion program for stealing money from an auto dealership that she had been working for. So they didn't know about that either when they hired her. So I know it sounds like it's all gloom and doom, but, we got to come into this with our eyes wide open, knowing about, all the dangers or the downsides of things when you're running a business. So Ken says, I've been watching your videos. Thanks very much. Oh, you're welcome. My son is headed to law school in fall of 2021. Oh, he's getting acceptance letters now. His scores could get him. Okay, well, that's great. His scores could get him into a tier 30 for sure, but maybe tier 20. Should he pick a tier 30 where he might do better, or more prestigious tier 20? I would say go to tier 20. Yeah, definitely. Just try to go to the more prestigious school. Yeah, because there are going to be, plenty of employers that won't recruit at a, say, like a tier 30 or, second tier law school, but they might be there recruiting at a tier or top 20 law school. So I think it's still better, to go for the top ranked school that he gets into. So good luck. I hope he gets into whatever schools he wants to go to. Yeah. And of course, it always depends on where your son wants to practice too. So you probably already heard me griping in my previous videos that when I moved to North Carolina, it seemed like my Georgetown Law School degree didn't really count for much, because most of the attorneys, they grew up in North Carolina. They went to these like local state schools. They went, it just seemed like it was a tough atmosphere and legal environment to break into as someone that didn't grow up here, and I didn't go to undergrad or law school around here. So I think that I was really detrimentally impacted by having to move to North Carolina, coming from a school that nobody really cared too much about. So just see where he gets into and see if he really wants to practice around that area, or I don't know if financial aid is also going to be a factor in his decision, but I hope he gets into that top 20 school. So, okay, so Dr. Sev says, yes, I'm learning to send them my appointment link where they have to pay for. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen a lot of people with these like cool websites where people can automatically schedule appointment times. So that's really pretty awesome. And they know they have to pay first. Yep, got to get paid, because, both Dr. Sev and I are in that kind of business where you're giving people verbal advice mostly. It's not like we're selling pizzas or, as people on JD Underground would say, I'm not selling widgets or steaks. If I were a grocer, would you run into my grocery store and expect me to give you free steaks? So sometimes people just kind of devalue that, because they think that, oh, well, you're just sitting around talking to me anyway. Why do I need to pay for you? So yeah, I got to set those parameters early on so people know that this is our business. We're selling our time and our expertise, and I can't stay in business if people don't pay me all day. So thank you, Cathy. Thanks for being here. And then Dr. Sev, thanks for sharing all these tips. Okay, so unless anybody has any further questions, I think I've touched on those like main issues about whether you should go solo or whether you should be self-employed. There's just a lot of factors that go into it. And also, if you have that ability to drum up business and go out and get the clients too. So I thank you all for being here, and I'll have to figure out my next video idea. My friend Angel, who was on here earlier, Angel Trazo, said she would love me to do one of those like rate my frumpy lawyer wardrobe videos. But I mean, it's not very educational, but it might be kind of funny because you can see all the like out of date styles that I have. And then I thought maybe I should combine it with, I go shopping online, like Yes Style, which is really for much younger women, for lawyer clothes or something. So maybe I'll do like a fun video this week. And then I still have a lot of raw footage to put another day in the life of a lawyer, which was filmed months ago, but I didn't really want to put it up on YouTube right after filming it. Hey, Nurse Glenda, thank you so much for being here. Nurse Glenda, fighting for the people. Nurse Glenda also has a really good YouTube channel. Obviously, she is a nurse, but she also talks about self-care and other like mental health issues on her channel, so please check her out. And Sam says, this is beyond my pay grade. I heard law can be outsourced to computer algorithms or countries. Well, not necessarily law in general, but definitely like law, what do you call it? Document review. Yeah, that's what I've heard, is that there have been some document review jobs that have been farmed out to maybe India or the Philippines or somewhere, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's true. Yeah. Oh, eliminate paralegals. Well, I don't know. Paralegals usually do more like hands-on work and stuff, but I definitely think that document review has fallen by the wayside, because that used to be like a decent way that people without real attorney jobs could still make a living. Like sometimes you could get paid like $30 to even more than $50 an hour if you had special language ability to review documents as an attorney with a JD. But the job market for document reviewers has just gotten even worse and worse, because there are so many new law school graduates coming out that are willing to work for less. And so I really think that the work being farmed out to other countries most likely is the document review work, not the paralegal work, because paralegals do more like, for example, a paralegal might help create like trial binders or binders of documents for court hearings, like photocopying and checking to make sure all the exhibits are in order. Or sometimes they might draft some minor motions or demand letters, or they might do a lot more client contact, like calling up the clients to get their financial information and fill out financial affidavits for divorce cases. So, okay, looks like somebody else showed up. Hi, Lindsay. Lindsay says, what legal tech startups? I have a foreign lawyer friend who works for a startup that creates tools for lawyers. Okay. Well, I guess that there are definitely a lot of like kind of legal related businesses, that offer services for attorneys. So I've definitely been seeing a lot of like ads for that on Facebook or even on YouTube, I know there are some companies that offer, I didn't mention this earlier, but this is a way to save money also. So there are companies that, for example, offer receptionists. So it's like a virtual receptionist who will answer your phone line for you. And then usually they would either like farm it over to your cell phone, or the person could do some minor tasks like scheduling consultations for you, or give some minor details like how to get to the office, how much the consultation fees are and stuff. So there are all these other like sub businesses that cater to attorneys and law firms because they offer different kinds of services, or different kinds of software that some attorneys use, like Clio for timekeeping, time record keeping, I guess. So I don't really know anybody who works for these types of things. Although, well, I did have like this person I knew that works for LexisNexis, but I'm not really sure what she does there, like maybe helping to like sell the software to attorneys or something. And then there's also something else called ourfamilywizard.com, which is actually a really great website. I highly recommend it, and I'm not being paid or sponsored to say this, but Our Family Wizard is a website that people can subscribe to. I think you pay something like, I can't even remember, maybe $90, maybe less than $90 a month, but it's really for people who are either divorced or have a custody battle or something. So oftentimes the parties agree, or the judge orders them to use Our Family Wizard to communicate with each other, so that all of the custody schedules, as well as the communications between the parents, are all saved onto their website. So later on, if there is another court hearing regarding custody, the judge can get back into the system and look at all the messages. So that kind of encourages the parents to not play dirty and call each other names and curse at each other and stuff. So yeah, Our Family Wizard, that's also like another side business that caters to certain attorneys in the family law field. And they do, I know at least one attorney who now works for them. So Ken says, where do you think a good job market is for lawyers in the future? Well, it's hard to say, but I don't think North Carolina is that great. I would still say in general, like DC is a good place to be a lawyer. Like the bigger major metropolitan cities probably have a lot more legal jobs, but especially around DC, there are all these like federal agencies around there that typically are usually hiring. So I think that the DC area is probably pretty good. And I think like in terms of federal jobs though, like I do know a handful of attorneys that are very happy with their federal attorney jobs, and they don't always have to be in DC. Like they could be working in a totally different state. So yeah, I'm just more familiar with DC also because that's where I lived and I started working there. I went to law school there. Yeah, and of course New York City, but New York City is so prestige driven. Like all of those like big corporate law firms, they still mostly only want people at the top of the top law schools. So it's still really hard to get those really competitive jobs in New York City that pay well. Oh, Lindsay says, sorry, I meant to say, what about legal tech startups? Yeah, so yeah, again, I just really don't know too much about this field. So unfortunately, I'm not qualified to talk about legal tech startups. Yeah, I don't know anybody else that works with these like legal technology places other than that one attorney that I sort of know who works for Our Family Wizard. Okay, so don't forget to get beauty sleep. Yeah, I think I probably need to get off the computer now. This was my second live stream today, and I really appreciate you guys all being here. It's so awesome to see, I can't believe my subscriber count has really gone up a lot in the last couple of weeks, and I've had more time to churn out all these videos and stuff. And I hope people don't feel overwhelmed seeing more uploads from me. But now is just a good time to do it since work has slowed down and things are definitely going to get busy in January. So thank you all so much for being here. Hope you guys have a great week. And, feel free to drop me a line in the comment box or wherever if you have any further questions or if you have any other ideas for future videos. So have a good night then. Thanks for being here.